In the ancient lands of Israel, the air hung heavy with tension. The Israelites were locked in a bitter struggle against the Philistines, whose warrior might loomed over them like a dark cloud. The armies of the Philistines gathered on one side of the valley of Elah, their fierce champion, Goliath of Gath, issuing challenges with a voice that echoed like thunder. Goliath was a giant, standing over 9 feet tall, adorned in armor that glinted menacingly under the sun. Each day for 40 days he strode to the forefront of the battlefield, mockingly calling out for an opponent among the Israelites. His laughter rang out like a death knell. Fear gripped the hearts of the Israelite soldiers, rendering them paralyzed with dread. But among them was a young shepherd named David. He was the youngest of 8 brothers, often tending to his father's flocks in the hills of Bethlehem, while his older brothers fought in the army. David had a brave heart, hardened by solitude and tempered by daily battles with lions and bears to protect his sheep. One fateful morning, David's father, Jesse, sent him to the battlefield to bring food to his brothers. As David approached the camp, he heard the haunting challenge of Goliath, echoing over the valley. The sight of the giant stirred something within him, not fear, but an unsettling sense of duty. The soldiers cowered, but David felt the stirrings of courage intensify in his heart. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" David exclaimed, his voice ringing with conviction. One of his brothers scoffed at him, trying to silence David's fervor, but the young shepherd's words reached the ears of King Saul. David was brought before the king, who studied the boy with skepticism. "You cannot fight this giant," Saul said. "You are just a youth, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David spoke earnestly about how the Lord had delivered him from the paws of predators, and how he feared not the giant. Moved by David's faith, Saul reluctantly allowed him to confront Goliath. Clad in his own armor, David felt encumbered and vulnerable. He stripped it off and opted for the tools that he knew best, his sling and 5 smooth stones he picked from a brook. As David approached the battlefield, Goliath chuckled, sizing up this puny adversary. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" he roared, enraged by the defiance of the boy. But David stood firm, unshaken by the giant's scorn. "You come at me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied," he proclaimed. With a swift motion, he loaded a stone into his sling and began to spin it above his head. One deep breath, and he released the stone. It flew through the air, a blur of motion, striking Goliath squarely in the forehead. The giant stumbled and fell, crashing to the ground with a thundering sigh. Silence enveloped the valley as shock settled over both armies. David did not hesitate. He rushed forward, took Goliath's own sword, and with a single stroke, he ended the champion's reign of terror. The Philistines, witnessing the defeat of their mightiest warrior, turned and fled in fear. The Israelites erupted in cheers, their spirits reborn in the face of David's faith. That day, David not only defeated a giant, but also awakened in his people a sense of hope and courage that would carry them forward. His trust in the Lord had proven that it is not size or strength that determines victory, but faith and the willingness to take a stand. Years later, David would grow to become a king, leading Israel with wisdom and courage, always remembered as the boy who faced the giant with a heart full of faith. His story would echo through time, a beacon for all who stand against seemingly insurmountable odds, a reminder that with courage and trust in the divine, even the smallest among us can achieve the greatest victories.